Hey, Sister Girls Book Club. We are back with another podcast episode. I'm your host, Sharee. And today I have author, activist, and entrepreneur, Rachel E. Cargle. How are you doing, Rachel?
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
Okay, on a scale of 1 to your favorite Beyonce song or for Cowboy Carter, how are you feeling today? First of all, you got to tell us the song, and then you got to tell us on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the Cowboy Carter song.
On a scale of 1 to Sweet Honey Buckin', I'm about a 7.
Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. I'm feeling it. But today we are talking about your book. Woo! A Renaissance of Our Own, a manifesto, and it's a manifesto on reimagining. This book, I'm gonna tell you, it threw me. It was like, girl, you have lived a life to write a book on. Uh, so one thing I noticed about your story in particular is like you go from just having this life where it's like you're an activist and maybe a feminist and like you're moving into that space. So it's just like, how do we get a book like this when all roads led to a book? Man, you talking about activism or feminism? It's like the career path was like, this is what the book is probably going to be about. Then it was like, skirt. So how do we get there?
I love that question, Sharee, because it is a very particular experience that I had. And I love that you pulled that out of the arc of my experience in the world. And actually, you're right. This book was supposed to be an activist book. I had signed a contract for an anti racism book. You're absolutely right about that. And in 2020, at the height of everything, I signed my book deal in probably 2019, early 2019. And then 2020 came and I was doing intensive online educating. I was in the midst of a huge career shift that came out of people caring about Black people all of a sudden in 2020. And at that time, I was just really burnt out on anti-racism work in particular. And so I called my publisher and I actually was like, I do not want to write this book anymore. I can't. I don't have the capacity to. And they said, no, we want to keep you. What do you want to write about? And I said, if I'm going to write, it'll be a memoir. And that's how it came to being a memoir.
That's very interesting because the whole time I'm like, well, technically, I
Mm.
we got something a little different, but you,
Yes.
this book to me, it blew my mind away. Honestly, every time I read a different portion, I was like, wow. I had to really sit and think about a few things and really kind of readjust your thoughts. And I think this is a book that you have to put in your mind. I think people have to be open minded or at the very least curious about the topic
Mhm.
that we're going to cover. So the title alone suggests that you're inviting everyone who reads your work to reimagine a new life for themselves. Um,
Mhm.
they want to, and you provided the framework and the language actually for what that looks like. So what made
Mhm.
you who readers on your journey so that they can begin their own?
Well, I mean, that's what my work is. My work is learning out loud, healing out loud, growing out loud. And so my book is a representation of that. And this connects directly to your first question, which was me kind of reimagining what a career could look like for me and me feeling worthy of telling my whole story and not just fitting into the space of anti-racism activist that people understood me to be. And so it was a little bit of a risk for me to be like, yes, I know that you're looking for this rage and this intent around racism, which I had displayed on social media for the totality of my public presence. And for me to say, actually, I'm going to write a memoir that will speak to all parts of me was a bit of me having some sovereignty and autonomy in my career to say, actually, I'm going to tell you who I am as a whole woman, as opposed to either fulfilling some sort of like trauma porn aspect of anti-racism work where there's this continuous energy and fighting and rage. And also, I was willing to have dimensions of myself that weren't fully developed or understood, even to myself, so that I could possibly build out for me a career where people want to continue to grow alongside me, to learn alongside me. And so in writing this book, I had consideration for how I wanted to show up in the world as someone who who wasn't necessarily a guru in anything in particular
Mhm.
or an expert, but who knew how to find the language and the tools to create pathways for us to build worlds for ourselves in the way that we reimagine ourselves, but for each other in our common activation towards liberation.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. So you broke the book up into every aspect of your life, belief systems, relationships, feminism, education, work, and then rest. On your journey, the first stop was your belief systems. And just reading that alone, that could have been a book in itself. Like literally, what made you want to put all this together and have one book instead of having like a book on each topic? And I mean, it's very layered and it makes sense when you read it. But I'm like, these are like books all by themselves. How did you stop and say, all right, let's make one book and not make like one, two, three, four? You know what I mean? More of like a series.
Yeah, well, I think the book is also an opportunity for me to do that. I don't I everyone who was involved with the book felt similarly to you, like, oh, this could be its own book, this could be its own book. And perhaps I was laying the groundwork for people to really understand me so they would see the various places I was interested in showing up, either as an activist or a voice or a writer or even just a thinker, around things like relationships or even belief systems. And so I agree that I'm looking forward to ways that I can expound on each topic. But with this being, I'm 35 years old. I'm very young to have a memoir out per se. And so I think that this was kind of also a practice for me to be like, okay, here's where I am. Here's the landscape of who I am as Rachel. Let's continue on this journey over my lifetime to witness how I grow and change and develop and better understand myself in each of these areas.
Yeah, and that makes sense too because I could see where it changes over time as you age, as you grow up and have experiences. Okay, so Rachel, I'm not going to front. When we first are introduced to you in this book, you are a little Christian,
Yeah.
young girl. You going to church, everything is copacetic. And then you go to college and you find your Christian friends and you find your Christian boyfriend and he later
Mhm.
becomes your husband and you're like in your early 20s. And it was like we are all in like lollipops and unicorns over here. And then before we even get to the middle of the book, like we don't even get to like chapter like 13 or something or page 150. We're like at 40. And it's like you are divorced, you
Mhm.
leave college, you given up traditional religion, you
Mhm.
recognize that you're queer,
Mhm.
become a whole feminist. I was just
Mhm.
like, skirt, skirt, right? So in the book, the story reads as a staircase. Like it almost like you just keep going
Mhm.
up. And so was that the reality of your situation and your lived experience, or was it more like a zigzag? And how did you align it to know that these were like this was the course that naturally, like how did you line that up?
So many interesting things about this question. The first is that I want to first touch it to a conversation I've been having now in this area of my life where I've been talking about our collective need. Well, I should say those who are interested in a life of self mastery or self discovery, and perhaps the way that I am. Um, the necessity for us to get off of the life escalator, something we're kind of set on, and then it goes through all of the steps we understand to be true as good in society, as the celebration points of society, including, college, graduation, marriage, baby, house, career, retirement, blah, blah, blah. And I often speak to the moment where I realized I hopped off of that life escalator during my divorce. And I decided I was instead I didn't have the language for it then, but now I recognize that I was really building my own staircase towards a goal that I actually had made for myself, as opposed to this life escalator society puts you on towards. I don't even know what the ending of that is. So, um, yes, to answer your question, I think I was very much building out my staircase and watching and curating for myself, and, leaning into opportunities offered by others to kind of build upon what I knew I wanted, and kind of where I wanted to go in life. And it was a practice of continuously collecting materials from the world around me with that curiosity that I had. I tell the story about, like, in the book, I talk about talking to my soccer coach about, like, how did he get this type of house? And what does it mean to, like, live in a way that wasn't struggle or poverty, which is what I understood as a child. And so, like, collecting that information and being like, okay, I see I'm going to have to make XYZ decision. And then I was nannying for a very long time for very wealthy families. And so I was, like, pulling from their lifestyles and reading their books and asking them questions to give me information for what I might want my staircase to look like. In my divorce, I was challenging myself about what I really wanted and how much I could really trust myself. And then I made that leap, and I took that material of, like, okay, I can do hard things, and putting that as a material to build my staircase. And so for me, yes, it has felt quite linear, but with as I've built, the good thing about a staircase as opposed to an escalator is you can sit and rest for a while. You can move backwards when you have some lessons you need to learn. You can speed up a bit if you recognize that you have the capacity to. And so it's not that it was easy because it was linear, but it was mine because it was linear. And I knew where I was going, even if I had hard times or had to rest in the midst of it.
I like that a lot, because I think that oftentimes when we think about just life in general, it's supposed to go up, 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 up. And then, like, slowly as you age, it gets to this resting spot. We don't really think that we have time to rest when we're, like, in our 20s. They tell you to go, 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 go. So even you introducing the idea that you can kind of, like, switch it up. It doesn't have to be a constant motion. It can be going up, but you can be creating a different life for yourself at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really changed my perspective about time, space, and I was really, I was like, whoa, I don't think I was fully prepared. So your childhood and a need for stability played a huge role, in my opinion, for the reason why you got married, right? So in your opinion, how many people wouldn't be married if they knew they were only doing it out of stability and societal norms, and not survival? And how do you think people can reimagine what stability looks like for them unattached?
Ooh, oh my gosh, Sharee, I have to tell you, I do dozens of interviews, and this might be one of the best ones. Thank you for your
Thank you.
I'm very judgy towards interviewers, admittedly, and I'm very much so enjoying this conversation. Thank you. Um, you know, I'm not even judging people who are marrying for survival reasons. Actually, like, I get it. That might be a smart tactic to make it
Mhm.
through society right now, to marry someone so that you can both afford a better living situation, or for companionship alone, or or even to honor traditions of arranged marriages, like whatever reason people get married, even if it is a societal expectation. I don't even necessarily feel like that's a bad thing. I just would love for people to remember that they have a choice, that there is an option to do something different. If that feels good for you and it aligns with your values, awesome. I love that you already have a framework in place for something that feels right for you. And so for those of us for whom it doesn't feel right, and we actually would rather be doing something else, I think that there is a deep fear that our desire of something different will ostracize us, which it does for some people, or our desire for something different makes us unqualified to do something different because it's so unfamiliar. And I think, along with the decision of being married and along with the decision to have children or not, to really take a beat and say, okay, let me dream up what my life could be like, what the juiciest, most wonderful, maybe even most practical, attainable, good life for me could look like. And how do these things fit into it? And if the answer is it fits into it perfectly, let me move forward, then great. But if it's like, actually, for example, for me, the type of slow mornings I prefer, the type of spontaneous travel I'm looking forward to, the type of dating life that I want, the type of home that I want to live in, the type of healing work that I want to do on myself and the capacity that takes, does not leave much room for me to raise a child and definitely not to raise a child with the type of attention and focus that I think a child deserves. So great, I can make that decision that having a child isn't a good fit for me, and I can find other ways to be in relationship with children. I can find other ways to feel nurturing, or whatever else it is that I might feel I need to meet in myself. So with marriage as well, I hope that my book calls people not so much to give an answer to your question of here's what you can do and how many people might be approaching marriage this way. I don't know that answer, but what I do hope is that people might pull from my story, my book, many other people who have similar stories that, oh, I can take a pause and know that I have a choice and there's no one thing I have to do or one thing that makes me a good person while another choice would make me defunct.
That still was a good answer, even though you said you didn't answer. I still feel like that was a great answer to walk away with if somebody heard it and was like, I just want to know. Okay, so when you realized that your marriage was over, you went back home and you said your grandmother practiced radical empathy. And when I heard that, I was like, wow. How did her radical empathy shape the way you accepted other people's truths and also to begin your own renaissance? Because it seemed like it was just like one of those things that catapulted you to say, like, it's okay to now
Mhm.
do.
Yes, thank you for that question. Um, you know, Grandma that day represented for me as the space of religion a bit. Like grandma was a Christian. She's who put us all through church. We all went to the same church. And so for me, maybe it was less of grandma herself and more of the concept of religion and this lifelong shame that I've found and held within religion. And the shame at that time was being activated around the action of divorce. And so when I got home and I saw grandma and I had the anxieties of what she might think of me or feel about me since I was getting a divorce, and her taking that opportunity just to hold me, just to hug me, just to let me be whatever I was in that moment, as opposed to feeling like it was more necessary to make me feel shameful about this decision that didn't align with a religion that she chose, that she probably at that point might have realized wasn't necessarily going to be my choice as well. Her prioritizing this space of connection and care over discipline and ensuring I followed rules of something that is quite arbitrary between our two physical bodies in the midst of that embrace, was really powerful for me. And I think it was probably the first moment, the first little unlocking I had within myself to have more empathy for others, in an ongoing way, and compassion when we witness mistakes that we've been told in our head have this binary of right and wrong, and opening a space for nuance and consideration of so much more than just quote unquote the rules.
I love that moment actually. And it was such a sweet moment because anytime you feel like, I feel like no matter what age, you always feel like if I do something wrong with the people who care about me and the people I look to for approval, where they feel like it's gonna be okay. You want them to say that even though I did this, it's gonna be okay. And I felt like that was she affirmed you in a way that was so like grandma like, you know what I mean? Because she could have taken a different route. Like, grandmas are always like the strict one, the no nonsense one. And it's like in
Yes.
that moment, she knew that it was such a big decision. Like the because you didn't leave because you were just like it was the worst situation ever. It was just like in your heart you knew that you wanted something different. Like, and what did different look like? And I also
Yes.
feel, okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, and for her to, like just see me, to let me be me in that moment. And she could have even come with it with kind of some compassionate correction. Like, you know what, Rachel, like I hear you and blah, 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 but she didn't even talk to me. She just hugged me. She just let whatever I was in that moment be it. Um, yeah. And it meant a lot to me.
I love that. It was like I really saw it like so vividly. I was like, oh my God, it's such a great moment. Okay, so do you think that if you hadn't left Ohio and moved to DC, you would have lived a life outside of your own limited beliefs? Would it have been possible, in your opinion, for you to have that same experience in Ohio? Because a lot of times people tell you like to move to a new city and you'll get a whole new experience. Do you think
Yeah.
if you stayed, you would have been able to have this like renaissance and reimagining?
I like that question. I think it's in me to have done that. I think it's an assignment of this lifetime for me, per se. And it's really funny because I've been talking about this a lot, that, well, two things. Oh, and one thing I wanted to say about my grandma that came to mind that I want to share. My grandma affirmed that I could, like, she trusted me with the decision I made. And so it really activated a trust in myself that, like, okay, things will be okay. If grandma thinks it will be okay, then I perhaps think it will be okay. And so it activated a self trust and a self knowing that I think has blossomed in me over the years since then. But I often say I think I would have lived a very wonderful life anywhere. Like if I was married with kids in Ohio, if I was doing real estate in California, if I was doing, like I think that I am a like equipped, innovative person who, regardless of where I would have ended up, I would have been well, and I would have lived a life that held a lot of the values and intentions that I do now. But um, this also doesn't answer your question, but it speaks to the essence of it. I really am starting to believe that in another lifetime, I actually was married and I had many kids and I had a wonderful life in that space. And maybe I like sacrificed a lot happily to live that experience. And that this lifetime was given to me to be like a queer polyamorous writer in Brooklyn who is exploring life child free, to have space for the type of healing and rest and adventure that I would like to have in this lifetime. So I think life would have looked different for sure. I don't have any, and even me and my ex-husband, we've been in conversation recently, and I think we would have been well if we had decided to go that way. It would have been a disservice to our higher selves. It would have been disservice to this version of myself that could have been existing. But yeah, I'm glad that I made the leap and I trusted and I felt worthy of what was kind of sitting in the fire in my stomach, to have something more. I don't even want to say bigger per se. It is bigger because that's just where it landed, but just something more pointed and something more very, very true to my body.
I like that answer a lot. It's so like liberating, almost like liberating in a way that you allow yourself to just answer the call for your own self. So you were a Christian, and then you moved away from religion, and then you begin to identify your highest values for yourself, which was ease, abundance, and opportunity. Can your framework, because I thought about this a lot, can your framework exist alongside religion?
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do believe that
Okay.
easily.
Okay.
Probably for most people, religion offers you your highest values. Actually, religion says, "Here's what your highest values are," and
Mhm.
great, if that aligns with what your highest values are, then yes, I think that this framework of recognizing what is most important to you and living within those values, yes, religion offers that perfectly. And highest values is kind of an alternate lens through which to view how you are holding your own moral compass and your own self truth, in the way that religion has a lot of history and books and language and text for it. But I think we have it within ourselves to make some of those choices as well.
Okay. That leads me into my next question.
Okay.
Because you had a Christian foundation, did any of your Christian values cross over into how you formed your highest values? And also, this was the thing that I kept thinking about. If everyone created their own highest values and moved away from religion, do you think that could replace God and dismantle society and government as we see it right now?
I'll answer your first question. Say your first question again so I can like.
Did any of your Christian values play
Oh,
into the foundation of like identifying your highest, like your highest values?
yes, they did. And I want to tell this story really quickly because I think it will give context for this experience for me. And I believe it's a story that I tell in the book, about when I was young, maybe 11 or 12, and I went to my friend's house and I spent the night on a Saturday, and it was Sunday the next day, and I was like, okay, we're going to church. It was like a white friend from middle school, and I was just so enamored by how kind their family was. Her mom was just so kind, and I really enjoyed her mother and father. And I just remember thinking, these are some of the nicest people I know. And then I spent the night that night, and it was Sunday the next day, and I go, oh, where are we going to church? And they're like, oh, we don't go to church. And I was floored. When I tell you, I could not believe that people could be nice and not in the church. I did not know that that could be a correlation. And so that was really, and that was when I was maybe 12 or 13. And that was really my first kind of breakaway from feeling deeply connected to religion, because I recognized that it was not true that the kindest people on the planet or the best people in the world were only in the church. And so that kind of opened up my vision a lot to consider religion. And I can remember being young and saying to my mother, and her being so annoyed to me, I remember saying, Mom, you know, the only reason you're Christian is because you were born here in Ohio and your mother was Christian. But if you were born in India, you might have been something else. And if you were born in blah, 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 it might have been something else. Like, and not because of value, but literally just because of where you lived. And then I would say, well, what about people born in the jungle who like never meet someone? Are they just like out of luck because Jesus just never, the word of the Lord just never made it to them before they died? And she would just be so frustrated with me trying to answer these questions. And so I started to not take religion so seriously when I was pretty young, because I started to ask these questions and I definitely wasn't getting any answers for them. So then if we fast forward to me kind of actually breaking away from religion in a more concrete way, I really was so grateful for my relationship to Christianity, because I really value the Bible. I love the stories in the Bible. I love the characters in the Bible. I love the values relayed in the Bible. So it's less about me trying to get away from the material of Christianity. I'm just not interested in being in the structure that, from my experience, has been very built with shame and fear, like a bunch of what we shouldn't be doing, because if we do XYZ is going to happen, while at the same time saying that we always have a chance to be forgiven and it's all out of our hands. And that just felt so very chaotic to me. And I no longer had interest in trying to like work that system per se. And so, yes, many of my values from Christianity transferred over, because it was really just me getting out of the framework and the system of Christianity and saying, what does it mean for me to live a good life, a kind life, a full life, a life that, you know, the type of stewardship that I want to have over my home, the type of connection that I want to have with my friends, the type of kindness I want to offer to the world. That all very much so is also reflected in Christianity itself. And so I think that there's nothing inherently wrong with Christianity. I don't like the way it makes me feel within it. And I don't like the way it has made other people feel within it. And so I think that if everyone, quote unquote, moved away from Christianity, I mean, there has been times in human history where Christianity wasn't the only way we understood how to be good or kind to each other. And as we can see in the world, even now, being religious does not equal being good and kind to people. So I actually might dream and fantasize about what a life of goodness and kindness outside of the structures of evangelicalism, shame, and fear would look like. Yes, I am very intrigued by that. But I also, that would also mean that the world is separate of patriarchy. You know, if the government is being demolished as well and religion is being demolished as well, that what we're really saying is patriarchy and capitalism being demolished in many, many ways, because both of those things are very, very intertwined with that. So there's a lot of hope for what a world like that could look like. But yes, I do think people can be kind and thoughtful and honoring and compassionate without religion telling us we better be.
I got it. And I think that I think a lot of people are going to question that, like that could they, whatever religion they are, and they're like, but I like this version of reimagining what other things I can incorporate or my highest values for myself, right? Using it as a guiding tool, but they don't want to necessarily give up Christianity, or if they're Muslim, or if they're Buddhist, whatever it is, but they want to incorporate this. And I was just wondering if it could exist, but you broke it down beautifully.
And I think their religion could be one of their highest values, their spirituality, their commitment, their ritual to that. And I think that's beautiful.
Okay. So this is the part of the book that really had me when you started talking about your new framework for intimacy. You specifically said you didn't have to depend on one person to satisfy all your needs. And I was like, girl. Um, so when creating the framework for your intimate relationships, did you ever compromise because you liked or loved the person? And what happens when you do? And is commitment valued in this same framework? I know you have the primary partnership. But what does commitment look like when you start to reimagine what intimacy looks like when it's not just from one person per se for everything, like marriage?
Can you say the question in another way? So I feel like I haven't caught it. Can you say it in another way?
Basically, what happens in your framework for intimacy when commitment and if you break the rules, because you created a value system even in intimacy, right? So what does it look like? We know what it looks like if you break the rules in marriage, if you cheat
Yeah,
or if you do something else, but when you're creating a whole new set of like
yeah.
rules for yourself, what does that look like when you go against your own rules? So like, have you ever compromised? I did that you said you wanted to love like more
Yeah.
than as many times as you want. You set the foundation, but what happens when you break the rule? Like you can fall in love with one
Well,
person and
I'm ever evolving. So I really don't have rules for myself. They really are structures so I can always recalibrate, but that doesn't mean I won't go in another direction once I kind of have an idea of myself, of where I stand and how I feel.
Mhm.
I think that, that's the beauty of being non-monogamous for me, that as I'm currently in the process of getting to know a woman pretty in depth, and we're having such a great time getting to
Mhm.
know each other. And one of the best parts of it is that we are actively building our framework for each other. It looks different and it feels different than another person that I might have been talking to. And this conversation of commitment, I know what feels good for me and what feels safe for me, but also every lover grows me and changes me. So I might feel different next time because of something I've learned and understood about myself or the world or humanity or the heart through my last relationship. And so, I'm learning with each opportunity to fall in love, and each partner, each lover that I have, we sit together and we say, okay, what does this look like for us, with consideration of any other decisions you've made with someone else or any other way you understand you want to move through the world. And it's a it's a living, growing thing. And I like that. I feel like in marriage, sometimes it just is the most exciting part is the engagement and the party and the wedding. And then you just kind of settle into something, which I know for some people that's like ideal, like this kind of settling into a life with just one partner feels beautiful to them. And for me, I really enjoy the living thing of my intimacy and the living thing of my romance that continues to change and grow and shapeshift based on the experiences I'm having with lovers each and every time.
Well, that's interesting. I feel like it's such a different way to view it because we've been programmed, that leads to my next question, at an early age to look at love, relationships, intimacy in a very specific way. Um, and do you think it's changing now because more people like you exist and you're sharing your stories, and we have social media where we have access to other ways and frameworks of what a relationship could look like, and it's inspiring more people to choose differently or to think differently, or are we just creating new ways for people to kind of like just now like dump on something and use it as political, movements, or you know what I mean, like to take, let's just say your framework and how you look at intimacy is very different from a traditional marriage, right?
Mhm.
More people that are like, you know what, I like that. Then it's almost like the shadow work of the shadow of it all. It comes and it's like, okay, now we're going to create 15 more laws just to go against it. So it's like, how do we even exist when we know for sure that once you step out that framework that's been created by traditional society, that
Mhm.
is met with such a heavy hand? How do we kind of like reimagine the world and like live in it?
Well, the thing I'm going to say is life, there's going to be hard either way. There's going to be the hard of staying under the thumb of society's expectations and kind of moving through the world with a bit of silencing yourself, or, you know, quieting yourself and your desires in order to fit under society's expectation. Or there's the hard of dealing with whatever, you know, comes with, like you said, moving outside of the norm. And so I'm choosing my hard, that I'd rather have the hard of expressing my freedom and having my own experience. And even when it is hard, like a really, you know, I was dating this woman, and um she goes, Rachel, you're bad at polyamory. She said that. She goes, you're bad at polyamory. And I go, that's such a weird thing to say, because no one ever says that to someone who's
Yeah.
doing something against the rules of monogamy. It's not you're bad at monogamy, you need to figure out another framework. It's this isn't working out, or you clearly have some other idea of how you want to move. And it but her saying that really made me think, like, how does polyamory show up in my life? How does non-monogamy show up in my life with the type of weight and intention that marriage has for many other people, which I find value in that weight and intention. And so I want to hold it. And so it has put me into a space of, okay, I know polyamory feels best for me. I know monogamy just, I'm never my best self within monogamy ever. And so how do I now start to build tools and start to have personal practices and rubrics, per se, to allow me to be the best lover, partner, whatever it is that I end up getting into with someone, that I could possibly be. And so there's the hard of trying to be a good partner within monogamy. There's the hard of trying to be a good partner and lover within polyamory. There's going to be work either way. And being a good person doesn't rest in the thing that you're doing. It rests in how you bring your morals and values, you know, into the space. And so I really feel yeah, I feel clear. I feel like in my 20s, I was like, okay, let me explore, let me see. I don't love monogamy, but, you know, everyone, I seem to be invited into it often, and everyone seems to find so much value in it. And I was like, okay, that's not for me. I was bad at polyamory for a little bit, not making the best decisions, not knowing how to move through particular situations. And now I'm like, okay, I've built some tools on how I want that to look. And so now that I'm 35 and I'm moving into towards my 40s and my 50s and my 60s, which I still hope I'm doing, I have lovers and I'm dating and I'm exploring myself all through those years. I now want to build tools to feel more centered in my intentions in the space, in a way that, you know, I just didn't have the capacity for a lot of the space of exploration and trying to see how this framework would really work in my life. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense actually. And the thing that was really interesting to me is that you were, I would say, brave and courageous enough to kind of blow it all up, right? I think most people, they'll choose to be maybe childless, or they'll choose to maybe have a different form of relationships, but they don't choose all of that at one time. You know what I mean? You created a whole new map. And so you kind of broke the mold, right? In a way that you wanted to live for yourself in all areas. But I must admit, when I was reading it, I was like, it's exciting, but it's also very scary, because one of the big things that kept playing in my mind was that, what are your beliefs now? What does dying mean for you now? What does it mean when you think about legacy now? Because a lot of times in our life, legacy is children, legacy is our offspring, or even like having a husband or a wife, or what does that look like? And in Christianity, if you die, and you're good, you go to heaven. So what, if you don't mind sharing, what those things look like to you now that you've reimagined? Have you thought about that part?
I'm still in the midst right now of kind of discovering, deciding around spirituality in particular.
Yeah.
Um, I've been studying other religions to see if anything really sits with me. And I haven't, well, I found value in every single one of them, but I haven't found anything that felt like, oh, this is a space that I want to sit in. Though I have had such moving experiences in relationship with various religions who have invited me, or made space for me. And even I go back to church sometimes. Sometimes I just want to be in the space of community and the choir and the pastor, you know, like I'm not adverse to it, but it's just not something I'm choosing to practice. And right now, to be completely honest with you, right now, the deepest sense of spirituality for me is within myself and within my body. And especially, I had such deep grief over the last year. I lost my mother and my grandmother and my older sister in the last 13 months or whatever it's been. And it has been incredibly spiritual for me. It's been an incredibly spiritual experience for me to still be in relationship with all of them in many ways, on the other side of their passing. After they pass, I have been in such deep relationship with my body. Like my body has changed, the way I relate to my body, the way I eat, what I drink, how I rest. Spending, I live in Jamaica for most of the year now, and spending time there has really just allowed me to be in relationship with my body and with my grief. I might even be as bold as to say grief is my spirituality right now. Grief is my religion, in the way that it takes up most of the space in my mind, in my heart, in my body. And the time that I spend alone now, particularly when I'm there in Jamaica, I'm wailing. I'm on the floor wailing, crying, releasing, working out, and moving my body in order to get this energy of deep grief moved through me, which also moves my creativity through me, which also moves my sexuality through me, which also moves my joy through me. And I'm in a deep spiritual space with my body, and that is how it is showing up most right now.
Wow. First of all, my condolences
Thank
for
you.
everybody that you lost. And I think what you said was very, I don't know, it was really like moving in a sense. And it's also I think about grief differently, because even you said like it's in your body, and it became like your religion. I've never heard grief even put like that. It's always just something that people tell you have to go through in order to just, them bouts, and you're trying to figure out how to make it through your day or get back to your old self. That's what I think in grieving, especially for me, anytime I've lost somebody, you're always trying to find the old you before that person passed away. But it's like that person that passed away died, and the person you were
With
before, like they died with, you'll never be that person. So
us.
even you just acknowledging that you're somebody different, right? While honoring that, but also moving through it in a way that feels right for you. I think that's
And
strike a lot of people, and really hit something.
And grief is a practice for me now. It's not something that I'm quote unquote getting through. It is a part of how I move through the world now, especially with like those three women. I mean, it was the three women who knew me longest in my life.
Mhm.
It became an identity crisis for me. Who am I outside of the women who knew me first? The people
Mhm.
who knew me first, the woman who carried me, my oldest sister who I always think about her doing my hair before school. Like there are parts of me that I only understood through the context of them. And so now I am in a space where I'm both fairly matriarchal in my family now, as for my nieces and nephews who now have lost so many people who they understood as their matriarchs. And you know my grief practice of being in relationship with my mother in ways, the examples that I use are like, when I go see art and I see art that my mother would have, me and my mom like to go to the museum together, I still say out loud, like, Mom, look. Like, I still invite her into the space with me. I cry when I need to cry. I made my grandma's Rice Krispie treats the other night for a lover to share with me as a grief practice. Like these, I'm constantly looking for ways to relieve myself of the excruciating pain of grief, and also continue to invite the people who have passed away into my life to be part of where I am in the living still. And remember that I am still living, and I must do so. And I have to figure out how to do that.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of times when it comes to grief, people don't know what to do with it. Like they really don't know what to do with it. They get so many theories, or they run here, but they really just, you don't
Yeah.
know. Especially when it's so monumentous. Like when you started talking about each person, I was like, at the same time, or in the same time span, back to back. You don't, a regular person wouldn't know what to. You'd be sitting somewhere in a corner at a wall, like just trying to figure out how do you come back to. And I think you put it so eloquently, and I think this is going to help a lot of people, when they think about what grief is and even reimagining what grief could be like for them. So thank you for sharing that. Um, wow, that was good. That was good. Feminism. The entire time I was reading, when you got to feminism, I promise you, I was screaming, "They don't like black women." I don't understand before you keep going. You found out that there were a lot of cracks yourself. I'm being funny, but you found out there was a lot of cracks in the feminist framework, and you began to learn out loud and share out loud about all the actual black women who play huge roles in feminism, and knowing that feminism had some white supremacist roots. What made you forge ahead and keep trying to educate white women and give them space and have that energy to do so, and not just saying, you know what, now that I know what I know, deuces.
Because I was in a lot of white spaces in my feminist world at the time. Like it was white feminist spaces that I was in. And so I felt learning those things didn't change my desire to be a feminist. It changed my understanding of who was around me in the midst of this fight. And so I never wanted to get away from the work, but I wanted to use my positionality within such white spaces to be having these conversations. And maybe I took it on because I recognized very early on that white women felt safe with me in whatever way, like for, whether it's because of how light my skin is, whether it's because of their, approximation to whiteness in my voice, or whatever it is that they have that made them both listen and engage with me about this topic, is really what motivated me, because I recognized how dangerous and how unforgiving and exhausting it was for other people who were like screaming at the top of their lungs and not being heard. I said, oh, okay, I'm being heard. Let me go ahead and say what so many other people are saying and might not be having the type of audience that I had, which was many, many white women at the time. And so I also took it as an opportunity to continue my learning just out loud in the presence of all of the white women who were following me. And it really was an opportunity. It was a very clear lane for me to serve the mission, because I had a white audience and I had language that I was learning, and I had, like I said, the platform. So it felt the work was there in front of me, and I did it.
Got you. At any time, so this is one thing that I always go back and forth with when I think about people who are in Black people specifically, who are in activism, who are in white spaces, and they're like talking to a lot of white people. Do you ever think, why would they change? Like, did they ever question, like, why would they change if it benefits them? It's almost like saying, like, why would I give up my seat so you can sit down just because your feet hurt? Like, okay. And how did that, because I feel like every activist kind of like has to have that question rolling in their brain. And how did you, because at one point you do kind of sit with it and be like, you called it white feminist island, right? And you were like, if I stay on this island, I'm going to be doomed right along with them. So when did you have that enlightenment? And then how did you say, okay, in order for me to exist and do the work that I want to do, I'm going to have to kind of shift my focus to Black women. You chose Black women over everyone. I thought that was bomb, obviously. But how did you get there?
Well, that was in 2020. Like I was telling you about the book changing, the moment where I was like, I cannot put all of my effort towards educating white women out of the detriment they're doing to themselves in the feminist movement. Instead, I'd rather write this memoir where I could perhaps give Black women a blueprint for how we can collectively navigate around these spaces, and white women can see how dynamic we are outside of just anti-racism, but still in the midst of reading this memoir about me, they're going to get the call to check their privilege and consider how they show up in the feminist movement. And I think it was important not only for other people to see, but for me to really sit and say, what is my work? And I knew my work wasn't engaging with white women in hopes that they'll stop being racist. Like I knew that wasn't what I was born for. And so I had to really consider what do I think my work is, and what do I want my work to, not just what do I think it is as if it's this mysterious thing we have to find, but what am I choosing to show up to as the work that I want to do in the world. And it was very clear and exciting and intentional for me to choose Black women in the way that you said I did in the book. And so while my work that was primarily white facing was the same thing of trying to protect Black women, trying to educate the world so that we can be more safe, trying to make clear past historical issues that will help Black women have more of a voice and more liberation. While my work looked that way at one time, I had to say, okay, how do I shapeshift that same work of caring for, protecting, putting my creativity toward reflecting Black women in another way? And now my work is doing that same thing, but it's around, very visceral experiences with Black women, hosting my retreats, writing books that speak to our particular issues, building out programs and educational opportunities for us to learn together outside of the white lens. And, over time, that same work might shapeshift into something else later on. But I think it's important for us to recognize, okay, this is the work that I want to do, and I'll do it this way. And if I feel like it's to my detriment, I have to find another way, but I will still do my work. And maybe one day I'll come back to the way that I did it before. I'm open to that. It's just I needed the space to do it differently, and I kind of heeded that call.
I love that. We're almost done. I have this quote. It's a little lengthy, but a lot of times people only read the first part of it, by James Baldwin, and then I have a question. So James Baldwin once said, to be a Negro in this country and be relatively conscious is to be in a state of rage almost all of the time and in one's work. Most people stop there, but he actually continues. And he says, a part of this rage is this: it isn't only what's happening to you, but it's what's happening all around you, all of the time, in the face of the most extraordinary and criminal indifference most white people in this country and their ignorance. Now, since this is so, it's a great temptation to simplify the issues under the illusion that if you simplify them enough, people will recognize them. I think this illusion is very dangerous because, in fact, it isn't the way it works. A complex thing can't be made simple. You simply have to try to deal with it in all its complexity and hope to get that complexity across, right? So, how do you mentally balance the exhaustion that it takes when somebody tries to oversimplify what your work is, with your eagerness to keep learning so that you're not in a state of rage almost all of the time and can do the work?
Thank you for that. And I think it's because I know the work can look more than one way. It's like an artist can be an artist without being a starving artist. A
Mm-hmm.
activist can be an activist without being a starving activist. And I've had to do a lot of work to pick the meat and throw out the bones of what society also expects an activist to look like, what society expects an artist to look like. And I have decided that I will, if I'm about to be a Black queer woman on this earth, the least I'm about to do is be comfortable. That's the least, because the world definitely isn't about to give it to me. So if those are three truths about me, not to include like the poverty I had in my childhood, there's so many levels of oppression that have come upon my lived experience and many of our lived experiences. I, Rachel Elizabeth Cargle, have decided that that like discomfort and struggle will not be a virtue for me in order to live out my intentions for caring for myself and my community. And so it was just a choice that I made. I don't know if there's any overall tool to allow us not to feel both ways, but I have made a choice for it that yes, I will hold this rage. And with this rage, I will offer myself comfort through whatever way that looks like for me. And it could look differently for many people. The comfort of me living in my freedom in multiple other spaces of my world, the comfort of demanding my value for things that are being paid for, expecting in many spaces white patrons of mine to cover the costs of things for other people so that I can still be cared for while still offering scholarships and offering access to things. Like it literally was a choice, and that's it.
I know that's right. The whole time I was like, yes, if I got to be this and the third, I might as well be comfortable at the very
Mhm.
least. I love that. One of the things that I want to put this very succinct so that you can answer it the best way. You left Columbia, right? That's in a very it's brave because you recognize your privilege, like your privilege in that space, but also you recognize it was still white supremacist stuff going on. It was still race. It was still so much going on, and you decided to leave. The one thing that I could say about scholars, Black scholars specifically, is that y'all are very smart, right? And you write books and you talk to each other a lot. But without the white gaze, there's a group of Black people who get left out the conversation, right? I'm from East New York in Brooklyn. That's a hood within a hood.
I
Quoting
know
Jim
you live in East New York. I was on
Jones.
93rd and Clarkson for a long time.
So when we have these conversations, I work at the Schomburg, so you can the levels of I went away to college at UB, so different levels of like access just by way of where you are. So when you think about how Black people can advance, or Black women, or whoever we're all rooting for at this time to make them advance in your work, how are we y'all having the conversation of like how do we bridge that gap? Because what I've noticed is in certain spaces, elitism, even in our Black,
Yep.
it exists,
Yep.
right? Scholar, even the way you write in academia, it's not that somebody
Yep.
from hood wouldn't want to read your book, is that they fundamentally wouldn't be able to sit and understand it
Yes.
just
I
based
mean,
on like statistics. So
yes.
have y'all as a collective, as scholars, thought about how to bridge that gap with programming, and what does that look like in the long term, and what does that look like I said, from people from my neighborhood who don't have the tools to act, or even the know-how to know to say, get this book. It has to be someone to tell them that this is for you.
Yeah, yes. There are, I first want to say there are so many wonderful activists who are bringing their academia to the streets, for lack of a better word, whether they're teaching over Twitter, whether they're writing it in ways that wouldn't be acceptable to the academy because of whatever format it must take, but who are making sure that it's accessible to communities through community programming, through political education. I'm thinking particular of people like Adrienne Marie Brown. I'm thinking of people like Princess Hemphill. I'm thinking of people like, oh man, I cannot think of her name and I'm so sad about it, but I'm going to share it if it comes to my mind. But these academics who have like PhDs. I don't even have a degree. I have just been kind of learning out loud and picking up things as I go. And I have been accepted so graciously into academic spaces to think out loud with people. But these people who have their PhD, who have gone through academia in the full extent of it, and who are deciding, I still want to be an independent scholar, step out of the Ivy Towers and be able to, the Ivory Towers, and be able to be in community with this knowledge. There are so many wonderful people who are doing that. And social media, I feel, has made it more and more accessible through courses and programming, workshops, and things like that. I personally started The Great Unlearn as an opportunity to give platform to academics to be talking directly to community outside of the academy, both because it fulfills them to be able to share their work. Like, they have done so much research, they have done so much writing, they have done so much just work, and it is beautiful to see them get to share their work with a community who's invested, but also for the community to be able to learn about American history, about environmentalism, about the history of various industries outside of the white gaze is, I think, a really powerful tool towards our liberation, so that we have more language and more perspective than just the white experience as we continue to build new worlds.
That definitely answered the question because I'm like, how are we doing this? Last question. You're not the same person now as you were when you wrote this book. And at times that can impact your writing. I remember when Salon dropped a seat at the table and then followed it when I get home, and fans were like, we were looking for a seat at the table part 2. And so because you've built this manifesto, I think a lot of people are going to read this expecting a seat at the table part 2, and it might not look like that. It might look like when I get home. And so when you think of your work now, what do you have in mind? Is it going to be a part 2, or is it going to be like Beyonce, act 1, act 2, act 3? How do you feel like your work is going to be in the future? Because people are going to be looking for after you write a manifesto, it's like, girl, where do we go from here?
I love this question because just over the last 24 hours, I've been listening to When I Get Home with new ears because I just heard one song and I was like, oh, wait, I feel different listening to this.
Mhm.
It speaks to me being different from when it first came out. And also, knowing in the back of my mind the way Solange is probably growing and changing and will never get anything like that again because it just was who she was in that moment. And so I can promise you it'll be much more When I Get Home than anything else. And I hope that, and I'm very inspired by the shape shifting that Beyonce and Solange can do, the growth that they can have. Willow Smith also is incredibly inspiring, the way that she is growing so publicly and so rapidly. And I hope to be amongst the ranks of people that the world witnesses grow out loud over their career. Yeah.
Okay, so I have these flash questions. That means you're supposed to answer them really quick. All right. Okay, writing in the day or at night?
Day.
Okay, Renaissance album or Cowboy Carter?
Cowboy Carter.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Paperback or hardcover?
Ooh, hardcover.
Girlfriends or Insecure, the shows?
Ooh, that is so hard. That's so hard. I'll say Insecure right now. Please, Mara, don't hate me.
Okay. Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr.?
Malcolm X, 100%.
Is it Uchi Wally or One Mic?
Uchiwali.
Okay, and who is Rachel Cargle?
Unfolding forever.
I love that. And that's the interview. Can you tell people where they can find you, how they can tap into your work, your whole umbrella company that you like literally manifested? I love it. And just how they can get more of you because you got a lot going on and you got so much that's coming. I already know.
Yes, thank you for this wonderful interview. I want to invite everyone, really, where a lot of my work is existing right now is within my Patreon. It's donation based. And so that's where you can do all of the learning alongside me, where I'm inviting the academics. Right now, we're working on a short film, like a short documentary conversation series, which has been wonderful. Also within my Patreon lives my Rich Auntie Supreme community for people who are child-free by choice. And we have conversations and in-person events there. And also I've been doing a monthly grief storytelling event where those who are on their grief journey come together and we just tell stories and in remembrance and say the names of our loved ones who we lost. And you can find all of that information at the link in my bio on Instagram. But just to follow my work and see what I'm talking about and learning through, growing through, healing through, you can always follow me on Instagram at rachel.cargle. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachel. This was a dope interview. I learned so much, and I feel like so many readers are going to love the book and then also hear like your thoughts behind it. I think that's always great. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. I appreciate you.
I hope you have the ultimate confidence as an interviewer because I literally hate interviews and this was very, very enjoyable. So thank you.